So statisticians use shapes to reveal the patterns in the data. But we also use images of all kinds to communicate statistics to a wider public. Because if the story in the numbers is told by a beautiful and clever image, then everyone understands. Of the pioneers of statistical graphics, my favorite is Florence Nightingale.
There are not many people who realize that actually she was known as a passionate statistician and not just a lady of the lamp. She said that to understand God's thoughts, we must study statistics, for these are the measure of his purpose. Statistics was for her a religious duty and moral imperative. When Florence was 9 years old, she started collecting data. Her data was different fruits and vegetables she found, put them into different tables, trying to organize them in some standard form. And so we have one of Nightingale's first statistical tables at the age of 9.
In the mid-1850s, Florence Nightingale went to the Crimea to care for British casualties of war. She was horrified by what she discovered. For all the soldiers being blown to bits on the battlefield, there were many, many more soldiers dying from diseases they caught in the army's filthy hospitals. So Florence Nightingale began counting the dead. For 2 years, she recorded mortality data in meticulous detail. When the war was over, she persuaded the government to set up a royal commission of inquiry and gathered her data in a devastating report. What has cemented her place in the statistical history books are the graphics she used, and one in particular, the polar area graph. For each month of the war, a huge blue wedge represented the soldiers who had died from preventable diseases. The much smaller red wedges were deaths from wounds, and the black wedges, deaths from accidents and other causes. Nightingale's graphics were so clear, they were impossible to ignore.
The usual thing around Florence Nightingale's time was just to produce tables and tables of figures. I mean, absolutely really tedious stuff that, unless you're an absolutely dedicated statistician, it's really quite difficult to spot the patterns quite naturally. But visualizations, they tell a story. They tell a story immediately. And the use of color and the use of shape, can really tell a powerful story. And nowadays, of course, we can make things move as well. Florence Nightingale would have loved to have played with. She would have produced wonderful animations. I'm absolutely certain of it.
Today, 150 years on, Nightingale's graphics are rightly regarded as a classic. They led to a revolution in nursing, healthcare, and hygiene in hospitals worldwide, which saved innumerable lives. And statistical graphics has become an art form of its very own, led by designers who are passionate about visualizing data.
This is the billion-pound O-gram. This image arose out of frustration with the reporting of billion-pound amounts in the media. 500 billion pounds for this war, 50 billion pounds for this oil spill. It doesn't kind of make sense. These numbers are too enormous to get your mind around. So I scraped all this data from various news sources and created this diagram. So the squares here are scaled according to the billion-pound amounts. When you see numbers visualized like this, you start to have a different kind of relationship with them. You can start to see patterns, you can see the scale of them. Here, in the corner, this little square, 37 billion, that was the cost, the predicted cost of the Iraq War in 2003. And as you can see, it's grown exponentially over the last few years, so the total cost now is around about 2,500 billion. It's funny, because when you visualize statistics like this, you understand them. And when you understand them, you can really start to put things into perspective.